Welcome. Israel's royal family was the family of King David. David himself ruled for almost 40 years, and for 400 years after his death, his family ruled as kings in Jerusalem. From this family, it was promised that God's Messiah would come. Yet, did you know that in the centuries before David lived, that family almost disappeared entirely from Israel? In fact, at one point, the only members of that family who were still alive were 2 widows. And one of those widows was a foreign woman. We're looking today at the book of Ruth, chapter 1. My name is Keith Simons. I'm a Bible teacher from England. I present these talks on how to understand the King James Version of the Bible, looking each time at a different Bible passage, usually a chapter from the Bible, and looking at it verse by verse and word by word. Today, as I say, we're looking at Ruth chapter 1. And so we begin, of course, at verse 1. Now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled that there was a famine in the land. So let's just look at this section word by word, just make sure we understand the meaning of what's happening here. It came to pass, a simple expression meaning it happened. When did it happen? In the days when the judges ruled. This is the period of time which is described in the book of Judges, when there was no king in Israel. And in the words of the last verse of that book, every man did that which was right in his own eyes. There was no legal system, no central government, no laws which all the people in Israel followed. No, people did what they chose. As we'll see, there was a sort of local government, each town administering itself. But when Israel had to go to war, which was often, they depended on Israel's judges. And the only power that Israel's judges seemed to have was the God-given power to gather the men together to fight against the enemies, because the nations on every side of Israel were bitter enemies of Israel. And so this is a time of the rule of the judges, and there is a famine in the land. When there is a famine, a shortage of food in a country, people often blame the government. In Israel, there was no government. So whose responsibility is the famine? There should have been judges to deal with it, especially when you bear in mind that in the book of Judges, famines generally aren't caused by the failure of a harvest. They're caused by the actions of enemies, destroying crops, stealing food from the people. If there was a famine in the land, it's because there was no judge who rose up to deal with it. Verse 1 continues, And a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. So, this man came from Bethlehem, the familiar Bethlehem where David was brought up and where many centuries later Jesus was born. Yet he didn't remain in Bethlehem or even in Judah, the southern part of Israel. He went to sojourn, to live as a foreigner in a foreign country, Moab, one of Israel's enemies. He thought that the troubles in Israel were such that it was better to live as a foreigner in a foreign country than it was to remain in Israel. So he goes with his wife and his 2 sons. Now, we're hoping, of course, at this stage, that we're going to hear the story of how this man became a great judge in Israel, of how he rose up and defeated Israel's enemies. But we're going to be disappointed. This is not a story of a great hero. Verse 2, and the name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi, and the name of his 2 sons Mahlon and Chilion, Ephrathites of Bethlehem, Judah. And they came into the country of Moab and continued there. Elimelech, that causes our hopes to rise. If we knew the Hebrew, we'd know the meaning of that name. It means, my God is king. What a noble and wonderful name. What do his sons' names mean, though? Mahlon and Chilion. Well, they're awful names. The 2 of them have corresponding meanings. They mean things like weak and sickly and dying and wasting away. Why would a man with such a noble name as Elimelech give his sons names like Mahlon and Chilion? Well, the answer is probably that he was in despair. He was in despair at the state of things in Israel. He was in despair and he considered it hopeless. He would no longer remain in Israel and trust Israel's God to deal with it. He wanted to escape. So Elimelech, we're going to remember as a man who tried to escape his troubles but failed. The family are called Ephrathites. The ancient name of Bethlehem was Bethlehem Ephrata. Seems to be a reference to that. So they've come into Moab, they're living there, and as I say, this attempt to escape their troubles fails. Verse 3. And Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left, and her 2 sons. Naomi is a widow, looking after these 2 boys, but the boys are growing up. Maybe there's hope that they will return to Israel. Maybe there's hope that Naomi can go back to Israel. But no, verse 4. And they took them wives of the women of Moab. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. And they dwelled there about 10 years. So Naomi finds herself with her 2 sons married there in the foreign country, and any hope she had of returning to Israel, of returning to the land, of returning to God, seems to have utterly failed. And 10 years go by. 10 years when they hope for children, but none of them actually have children. And then the next tragedy strikes them. Verse 5. And Mahlon and Chilion died also, both of them, and the woman was left of her 2 sons and her husband. So both of the sons have died. We don't know whether they died together. You've got to remember, Moab's people saw them as enemies. They might have been attacked. Or maybe their names, which suggest that they were weak and sickly and ill, maybe they fell ill. And the 2 women they'd married in Moab just had to look after them until they died. But whatever happened, the woman, Naomi, found herself alone and in a foreign country. But not quite alone, because with her still are these 2 women. These women, foreigners from Moab, Ruth and Orpah, who married the 2 sons. So you've got the woman, Naomi, from Israel, and these 2 foreign women living together in the same little house, struggling by manual labour, struggling by cleaning and harvesting and doing whatever jobs they could do to earn just enough to live off. And Naomi is desperately poor in a foreign country, and then hope comes. Verse 6. Then she arose with her daughters-in-law, that she might return from the country of Moab. For she had heard in the country of Moab how that the Lord had visited his people in giving them bread. The famine has lasted 10 years, but it's over, and Naomi has heard a report, maybe from someone who was travelling to sell things. He's brought a report. He's been in Israel. He's seen Bethlehem. There's food there at last again. And Naomi thinks to herself, why am I staying here in this foreign country when I can return to Israel and to return to the true God? And so she gets up. She sells what possessions she can. She carries what possessions she can. And she begins this long journey back. Moab and Bethlehem, they're sort of on opposite sides of the Dead Sea. The journey is a difficult one. For 2 or 3 days, she will be travelling down from the hills of Moab to reach the point north of the Dead Sea where she could cross the river Jordan. It's near to the town of Jericho. And she needed to wade across the water there at a place where the water was shallow enough, no bridges then. And when she crossed over, she would be in Israel, but she would still have 2 days, 3 days journey, maybe longer if she was weak, and she does seem to be weak, passing through the deserts of Judah, going north and uphill in the direction of Bethlehem, a difficult journey. And she is wanting to go there. And so she goes with these 2 young women. Verse 7 again. Wherefore she went forth out of the place where she was, and her 2 daughters-in-law with her, and they went on the way to return unto the land of Judah. Verse 8. And Naomi said unto her 2 daughters-in-law, Go return, each to her mother's house. The Lord deal kindly with you, as ye have dealt with the dead and with me. Naomi speaks to her 2 daughters-in-law. That's the 2 women who married her sons. The sons are now dead. And she urges them, Go back. Don't go with me on this journey. Though it means the loss of everything, I'm returning to God. But that's not for you. You're foreign women. The best hope for you is that you're still young. If you return to your mothers, then maybe your mothers can arrange for you to marry a man from Moab. And then you can have families of your own. And she prays for them and she blesses them. She blesses them in the name of the Lord, Israel's God, in whom she is starting to trust again. The Lord deal kindly with you, as ye have dealt with the dead and with me. Yes, I remember, you are foreigners, but you've still acted with great kindness towards your dead husbands, and now you're acting with great kindness to me, offering to return on this difficult journey. But I want you to go back to your homes in Moab, and I pray that God will show great kindness to you. Verse 9. The Lord grant that ye may find rest, each of you in the house of her husband. Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voice and wept. Yes, Naomi blesses them again and again in the name of the Lord. She declares that they are to go back, that they are to marry again in Moab, and she prays that they will find rest and peace and contentment in married life with a new husband, each of them. She kisses them to show her love to them, and they all cry together. There they are, just on this path going from Moab in the direction of Israel, and they're crying together and weeping. Verse 10. And they said unto her, Surely we will return with thee unto thy people. They don't want to leave Naomi. Naomi may be far from God, but there's something about Naomi which has told them about God. And they feel a strong attraction to be with her and to stay with her. So Naomi argues with them. Verse 11, and Naomi said, "Turn again, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Are there yet any more sons in my womb, that they may be your husbands?" Turn again, turn back to Moab, turn back to your family's homes and remarry. And then this strange passage, it reads strangely to us today. Are there yet any more sons in my womb? Naomi is referring to an ancient custom that became a law in Israel. It's very important in the book of Ruth. We'll see a lot more of this custom later on, but for the moment it's just mentioned. And the custom, the tradition, the law is that when a woman marries into a family, she's entitled to have a baby from that marriage. And if her husband dies before she's had her baby, then she's entitled to marry her husband's brother. And by means of that brother, to have a child in memory of her husband, her first husband, who died. And Naomi is saying, well, both my sons are dead. I can't offer you a brother of your husband who's died, unless, of course, I myself have more sons. There's an account in the book of Genesis of Tamar, who waited in these circumstances to marry a boy who had not yet grown up. And when that boy reached the proper age, she was refused marriage with him. But Naomi, she says, you don't need to wait, because I'm not going to have any more sons. I consider myself an old person. Verse 12. Turn again, my daughters. Go your way, for I am too old to have an husband. If I should say, I have hope, if I should have an husband also tonight and should also bear sons, verse 13, would ye tarry for them till they were grown? So Naomi says, look, imagine I were married tonight. Imagine I should have sons. You're going to have to wait many years for them to grow up. To tarry means to wait. She continues, would ye stay for them from having husbands? Would you refuse to have husbands while you were waiting for these little boys to grow up in the hope that you could marry them? Nay, my daughters. Nay means no. Nay, my daughters, for it grieveth me much for your sakes that the hand of the Lord is gone out against me. It grieves her. She's deeply sad about it, not so much for herself, but for the sake of these young women. There is no way they can have children from her family, she believes. There is no way they can follow this custom and have a child in memory of their husband who's died. She says, the hand of the Lord is gone out against me. She clearly believes that God is punishing her for her wrong action in leaving Israel. She believes that the death of her husband and her sons is a result of that. Well, we might say, well, they might have died anyway in Israel. But it's worse than that for Naomi, because she's had to bury them in a foreign country. She's had to bury them in a country which she is now leaving. She can't even return to their gravesides. No, she says, God's judgment has come against me, and that makes me deeply sad. But nevertheless, she says, she insists, I'm returning to God. I'm returning to Israel. I'm returning, but only returning to die. Verse 14. And they lifted up their voice and wept again. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clave unto her. So Orpah, one of these young women, makes a decision. She is going to do what Naomi's advised her. She's going to go back to her mother's house and to hope for another marriage there in Moab. She kisses Naomi. She's kissing her with great love, but she's kissing her goodbye. They will never meet again. They will never see each other again. But Ruth clave unto Naomi. Ruth held unto Naomi. Ruth, maybe she literally held Naomi's arm. She had no intention of leaving Naomi. So Naomi tries once again to persuade her, verse 15. And she said, Behold, thy sister-in-law is gone back unto her people and unto her gods. Return thou after thy sister-in-law. So we don't know whether Orpah really did forget what she'd learnt from Naomi about the true God. Maybe she tried to serve the true God in Moab. But as far as Naomi was concerned, no, Orpah had gone back. She'd gone back to the life into which she was born. She'd gone back to those false gods of Moab. We might ask what the religions in Moab were like, and I'm afraid the answer is not very good. In fact, it's awful. We have an account of a king of Moab later on in the Bible, and that king decided to sacrifice his own son, to kill his own son as an offering to one of those gods of Moab. So to return to the gods of Moab is to return to awful and evil religions. And Naomi is saying, look, that's how you were born. That's where you belong. Go. Your sister-in-law has gone back. Ruth, you should go back too. But Ruth will not accept that. Ruth said, verse 16, Entreat me not to leave thee, or to return from following after thee. For whither thou goest, I will go, and where thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God. Entreat me not. Don't urge me. Don't urge me to leave you. Don't urge me to return back to that place. I'm not going there. I've learnt something from Naomi about Israel's God, that he's a true and living God, that he's the only God, and that is the God I want to serve. Ruth says to Naomi, where you're going, I'm going. Where you stay, I will stay. Because I declare now that Israel's people are the people I belong to. Don't consider me as belonging to Moab anymore. I belong to Israel. And in particular, I belong to the God of Israel. The God of Naomi is my God. What's Ruth saying? That she wants to care for Naomi so that she can serve Naomi's God. And what's more, Ruth isn't just going to help her on the journey. She's going to stay with Naomi and look after her as if she were her own mother. Verse 17, Where thou diest will I die, and there will I be buried. In fact, even after Naomi has died, she's still not returning to Moab. She belongs to Israel now. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if aught but death part thee and me. The ancient form of an oath, a serious promise. She's saying, may God punish me ever so terribly if I allow anything but our deaths to separate us. But notice something special about that oath. You made it in the name of your God if you made a serious promise like that. You were asking your God to be the witness of that promise and to punish you if you didn't keep it. Which God did Ruth make that promise in the name of? Was it one of the gods of Moab? Let's look. The Lord, Israel's God. She's made the promise in the name of Israel's God. She is declaring now Israel's God is her God, her judge. Verse 18, Naomi can say nothing more. When she saw that she was steadfastly minded, that means determined, to go with her, then she left speaking unto her. So this long and difficult journey resumes, and about a week later we reach verse 19. They've passed through that journey with all its dangers and all its troubles, the difficulty getting food, getting water, the danger of robbers and people wanting to attack and seize as a slave a young woman like Ruth. They've got through all of that. Verse 19. So they two went until they came to Bethlehem. And it came to pass, when they were come to Bethlehem, that all the city was moved about them. And they said, Is this Naomi? They're horrified. She left a young woman with her 2 sons and her husband. She looked so healthy and strong and well, and now, about 10 years later, she looks like an elderly woman, weak and frail. And people are shocked. They say, can this really be Naomi? And Naomi herself is in deep despair. Verse 20. And she said unto them, Call me not Naomi. The name means pleasant in Hebrew. Call me Mara. That means bitter. For the Almighty hath dealt very bitterly with me. Verse 21. I went out full, and the Lord hath brought me home again empty. Why then call ye me Naomi, seeing the Lord hath testified against me, and the Almighty hath afflicted me? There's something going on here with the names of God. You notice how she calls God twice in the passage I've just read, the Almighty. That's the name of God which we often see in the book of Job, who suffered so much. The Almighty, Shaddai. Christians know it better as God Almighty, El Shaddai. Shaddai is a Hebrew word. Some people think it means the destroyer. I don't think that. I think it comes from the Hebrew word shad, which means a woman's breast. God caring for his people like a mother cares for the baby at her breast. How she nourishes that baby, how she loves that baby, how she looks after the baby. I think Naomi is saying, I've nothing now, but the Almighty is my provider and my sustainer. Like in Job 13:15, where Job says, Though he slay me, yet will I trust in him. Here's a verse that shows that the word Almighty, Shaddai, means the provider. It's Psalm 91 and verse 1. He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. Do you see it's saying that the person who's got a close relationship with God is living under the protection of Shaddai, God who is Almighty, God who is the provider and sustainer of his people. So there's something very curious happening here with Ruth, because we see Ruth admiring the faith of a woman, even though that woman's faith seems so weak. How can Ruth admire that faith? It's simply because that faith is in the true God. It's simply because Naomi is showing complete dependence on the true God. Even with the loss of everything, Ruth's faith is strengthened by that. Verse 22, So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, with her, which returned, out of the country of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem in the beginning of barley harvest. Barley is the first grain harvested in Israel. Wheat follows on from it. So the report which Naomi received in verse 6, the Lord had visited his people in giving them bread, was a report on the harvest fields, almost ready for harvest, or a report on Israel's security, that now the enemies had been defeated. Maybe a judge had risen up to fight against those enemies, and Israel's farmers could at last harvest their grain. Well, more of this in chapter 2, which I hope to come to in the next of these talks. But now I'm going to read to you the first chapter of the book of Ruth in its entirety. But before I do so, let me give you my email address. It's 333kjv@gmail.com. I'd love to hear which part of the world you're from, and if you're from America, which of the states. 333kjv@gmail.com. And now here is the whole of Ruth, chapter 1. Now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled that there was a famine in the land. And a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. And the name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi, and the name of his 2 sons Mahlon and Chilion, Ephrathites of Bethlehem, Judah. And they came into the country of Moab and continued there. And Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left and her 2 sons. And they took them wives of the women of Moab. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth, and they dwelled there about 10 years. And Mahlon and Chilion died, also both of them, and the woman was left of her 2 sons and her husband. Then she arose with her daughters-in-law, that she might return from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the country of Moab how that the Lord had visited his people in giving them bread. Wherefore she went forth out of the place where she was, and her 2 daughters-in-law with her, and they went on the way to return unto the land of Judah. And Naomi said unto her 2 daughters-in-law, Go, return each to her mother's house. The Lord deal kindly with you, as ye have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant that ye may find rest, each of you in the house of her husband. Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voice and wept. And they said unto her, Surely we will return with thee unto thy people. And Naomi said, Turn again, my daughters, why will ye go with me? Are there yet any more sons in my womb, that they may be your husbands? Turn again, my daughters, go your way, for I am too old to have an husband. If I should say, I have hope, if I should have a husband also tonight, and should also bear sons, would ye tarry for them till they were grown? Would ye stay for them from having husbands? Nay, my daughters, for it grieveth me much for your sakes that the hand of the Lord is gone out against me. And they lifted up their voice and wept again. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clave unto her. And she said, Behold, thy sister-in-law is gone back unto her people and unto her gods. Return thou after thy sister-in-law. And Ruth said, Entreat me not to leave thee, or to return from following after thee. For whither thou goest, I will go, and where thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God. Where thou diest will I die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if aught but death parts thee and me. When she saw that she was steadfastly minded to go with her, then she left speaking unto her. So they two went until they came to Bethlehem. And it came to pass, when they were come to Bethlehem, that all the city was moved about them, and they said, Is this Naomi? And she said unto them, Call me not Naomi, call me Mara, for the Almighty hath dealt very bitterly with me. I went out full, and the Lord hath brought me home again empty. Why then call ye me Naomi, seeing the Lord hath testified against me, and the Almighty hath afflicted me? So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, with her, which returned out of the country of Moab. And they came to Bethlehem in the beginning of barley harvest.